Hi, my name is Marc Shumsker, and welcome to the YouTube channel where you learn to work in casinos as a professional poker dealer. Right now I'm going to be going over how to quarter somebody, which is something that I didn't really need to know for the first 10 years or so of working in the industry. But now that there's all these double board PLO bomb pots, this comes up a lot more than it used to for me, and even in the Texas Hold'em double board bomb pots. Occasionally you'll have to quarter somebody in those games as well, and I want you to see how to do it because poker players get real nervous when a dealer's never seen this before and their money's at stake and the dealer is sort of fumbling their way through it. And honestly, even though I'm True Poker Dealer on YouTube, it wasn't actually that long ago where I had to sort of figure this out on the fly, and even the players didn't have confidence in me. And you know what? That's okay. I didn't know how to do it. And so I'm going to start with the basic scenario and tell you what quartering somebody even means. So let's forget about betting for a moment. Let's just take a look at these hands right here and see who wins. We're pretending that this is a PLO double board bomb pot. In PLO, you have to use exactly 2 from your hand and exactly 3 from the board to make the best 5-card poker hand. And I teach all about that right here on YouTube. If you join the channel, you can see the entire curriculum for PLO and you can learn how that game works start to finish all the way from scratch. And so looking at these hands right here, see if you can identify who wins on your own for a moment. So now, just to take a look at the winning hand. So the best hand that we have up here, we have a 10 deuce over here. This is 10s full of deuces. And we have a strong hand over here. We have 8s full of 10s, not as good as 10s full of deuces. Over here, this player doesn't have a whole lot. Over here, this player doesn't have a whole lot. You can see they had a flush draw up top. I would argue it's probably best not to pursue that given the top board. But they had a pretty decent hand down below as well. And then what about the bottom board over here? This player here and this player here both have an ace high straight. Ace, king, queen, jack, 10. This player over here has a king high straight with the king, queen, or you could do it this way if you wanted. A king high straight with the king, jack. And if they didn't have the king, you can see that they would have a queen high straight, either with the queen 8 or with the jack 8. And you can see this player over here has 3 5s down on the bottom. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that these two players tie for this board here, and this player wins this board up here. And if you don't know this, in a PLO double board bomb pot, each board gets exactly half of the pot. So this player here with their 10 deuce will win half of this pot plus any betting that happened on the end. I don't have the bets out right now because I'm just showing what wins. And then this player here will win half of the half here, so a quarter of the pot, and this player here wins half of the half here because they both have the winning hand here and these two players lose. So I'm just going to bring these hands to the muck, and then let's say that this was all the action and it was just right here. Normally what you do as the dealer is you're going to take this, half of the pot goes to this board, and then you chop the rest of this up, and we'll get that out of the way. And usually in a game like this, the extra 5 doesn't get broken down. Sometimes it does. And then you split it up like this. And then that's how that's paid out. So this player ended up with a quarter of the pot. This player ended up with 3/4 of the pot. And so what this video is going to teach is how to handle those situations when there are bets at the end, because it can take a long time to bring all the chips into the middle and then distribute all the chips back out. And so I'm going to show you a way to do that so that you know what you're doing when you're dealing on the game. And you don't have to have the players really concerned and stopping you and correcting you so that you know, I got this. So let's bring all this back. Now in a PLO double board bomb pot, there's a reasonable chance that both of these players would have been all in with these hands. This player over here is thinking, I got the nuts on this board, ace king, nut straight, and I'm strong over here. I've got 8s full of 10s. It's a pretty good hand over here. This is one of the few hands that they're scared of. 10s full of deuces is feeling great up top, and the ace king, nut straight on the bottom. There's a reasonable chance these players would get all their money in. And so let's say that they did that. And as the dealer, I have to quarter this, right? So there's a fundamental rule that you have to make sure that you follow as the dealer here. The first thing you do is you need to make sure that you have the correct amount from each player. Right, just looking at these stacks, I'm pretty sure that this player has more, but I'm not 100% sure. Pretty sure is not good enough, so we're going to actually check. So I'm going to count this out here. All right, so this is 15, 17, 19, 2,050. Yeah, it looks like this player's got a little more than that. 2,050. So our natural instinct is going to be to bring all these chips in and then to split it all up the way that we said. So I'll just show you how that looks. Keep in mind, this is not what we recommend to do. This does take a little while. Let me get the burn cards out of here. All right, so now we would hand half of this off over here. And then we would split this in half. Extra chip goes to the position. And we would split this up as well. I mean, not terrible, but there's a better way to do it, and there's a way that the players are going to already be used to. So let's set that back up, and I'll do it the other way. So we're going to create an example to make this as simple as possible for you to picture. Let's imagine that there's 20 bucks in the main pot. This player's all in for 500. Maybe there was a lot of betting on the river, and this player called for 500. And so now we're going to see where this money ends up by the end of the hand. And then we'll be able to conclude a shortcut that we can use in order to make your life easier as a dealer, just like my life's easier as a dealer with this shortcut. So let's watch what happens when we bring this 500 from this player to the main, 500 from this player, and now we're going to split it up. We know this is 3/4 of the pot and this is 1/4 of the pot. We've already figured that out. So 3/4 of the pot, first they get half, and then we split this up. And then they get like that. So these red chips, we know that these red chips started in the middle, and just like the math says it should, there was 20 bucks in here. This player got 1/4 of 20, which is $5. This player got 3/4 of 20, which is $15. So then we look at the rest of it. Here, this player got $250, and this player got, as you might guess, $750, right? So of this 500 plus 500, which is 1,000 total, this player actually got the correct ratio. They got 1/4 of that. So if we think of this whole betting amount as 100% of the river betting, we can split that up as 25% of this money goes here. We don't even have to bring it in. And 75% of this money goes here. We don't even have to bring it in. So how do we do that? How do we do that smoothly and easily? Well, remember, right here we've got 255, and here we've got 765, right? So let's do this again, back to where we were, just so that we can demonstrate this, and this always works out. We're going to go back to the starting point, and we're going to say, all in for 500 over here, and a call for 500 over here. Okay, so when that happens, here's what we do. This player needs to end up with $250. We know that. This is 1,000. 25% of that, 1/4 of that is 250. We've already proven it. Now we can figure out how to do it easily. Well, 250 is exactly half this bet. The shortcut that we use in this scenario is the player that gets 1/4 is going to give half of this bet to the player that has 3/4. If we give 250 from here, now we're up to 750, and this player has 250, and that's correct. And then we just chop this up accordingly. So let's watch how that works. So this is 500, so as a dealer, I would say, okay, 250 of that has to go over here, half of that goes over here. So then we would get our 250, we would give this player back 250, and then I always tell this player, take your bet back. That's 50%, right, of the total river betting. So you get 50% back. And again, this only works this way when there's 2 players that are putting money in on the river. 3 players or more doesn't always work exactly this way. So start memorizing this shortcut for when there's 2 players putting money into the river. One of them gets 3/4, one of them gets 1/4. And so just like that, this player is going to get their 500 plus the 250. And then we split this up. It's pretty easy to split this up. And there we go. That's all the work we had to do. And there's an even quicker way to do it, an even simpler way to do it. So how could there be an even simpler way to do it? Well, I'll show you. Now in this case, it barely saves any time, but I just want you to see this. Over here, we're totally fine splitting this up by just building up chip stacks next to each other that are even. We know that they're even. As long as the chip stacks are the same denomination, it's only greens or it's only red, and as the dealer, we can see from the side perfectly. So we know if there's an odd chip that's in a stack, we have the best angle to look at it. That's part of why we use that procedure. We don't count out the exact amount of the pot and then calculate how to give everybody. We just stack it up, break it in half, because that's so much simpler. We can do that with this player's money. If half of it is going to this player over here, we can say, take your bet back, and then there's no actual player at the table, so I'll do it for them. And then we can literally just stack their chips up, cut it in half, hand it off. So yes, it was even simpler. And now as you see, that ends up being $250, the correct amount. It works every time like this, and there's a few things you have to make sure that you're paying attention to, but this is a very nice way to do it. And then again, always remember to split this up accordingly when you're done. So now back to this example here. We have this player all in for $2,050. This player had more than that, so we have them put out the $2,050. And instead of having to bring all these chips in and then split it up, all we actually have to do is say, okay, you're going to get half of this. We can say the amount if we want. Saying 1,025 in this case might actually be quicker. You literally just take this right here, slide it over. Or if you'd like, we can not do any math, not think about anything, and just literally split this bet up right here. And meanwhile, we would tell this player, take your bet back, so they would do that. So the dealer doesn't have to do this, but that's how it works. So we can just go like this, give them half the money, and then we give this player back this amount. And just so that you can see, that is the correct amount, 1,025. And the players are used to this. So when there's an extra chip here, I personally put that extra chip in the half of the pot that I'm going to quarter. Is that correct? No, not always, but it's fine. And that's how we do the basic quartering for somebody. Now, just to be clear, some games actually choose where the extra chip goes. In the house that I work in, the way that the structure is set up, worst position gets the extra chip. But they don't have the extra chip designated to be either the top board or the bottom board or anything like that, so I don't worry about it. If your poker room manager tells you what to do and tells you to deal it a certain way, always listen to them over me. But my typical way of dealing that scenario is to put the extra chip with the board that's going to be split in half. Okay, great. So we figured that part out and how to do this. And it's okay, the first few times you do this, even though I just explained it, you are going to have to think to yourself, wait, am I right about this? That's fine. There are some variations to this that make it a little bit complicated, that make it so that you're maybe not sure that you're 100% right about what you're doing, and then you figure that out over time. So don't be afraid to go slow and just double check and make sure that it applies to the circumstance that you're in completely. But now there are a couple of little variations, like I said. Well, let me show you the most simple one. Let's say that this player was all in over here for an extra $5. So this was, as we had it before, 2,050. Now it's 2,055, 2,055 over here. Well, the way that this works out, if we want to give exactly half of this chip stack to this player, it actually doesn't work, right? We can't cut this chip in half. We don't have a $2.50 chip. We don't have 50-cent chips. We don't have any way to do that. So what do? Well, as we learned before, the money in here gets split at the correct ratio, and the money out here gets split at the correct ratio. So a simple way to do this, to make it easy for yourself, is you just take 5 from each player and bring it to the main. And now you're left with a number that you can split in half very easily. By taking an equal amount from each of these players, we maintain the integrity of how this works, and now we have an amount that we can just split in half and move on, back to normal. And to make this even simpler, let's say that these hands were reversed and this player's the one that's getting 1/4 and this player's the player that's getting 3/4. You might have a scenario where this player goes all in and this player calls by just dumping a ton of chips in there. And the thing that you need from this player is you need the $5 extra. You don't need to break this whole thing down and figure it out that way. You can take this $5 chip, bring it to the middle, and ask this player to give you any $5 chip. It's all the same. Because this player is taking their bet back anyway in this case. They're the ones that get 3/4 now. I switched the hands in case you didn't notice. So now they've got the tens full of deuces and they've got the straight. And this player only has the straight for half of this board. And so now we would just be splitting and giving this player half of this. So we'll do it the long drawn out way. There we go. And then we split this as normal. And in that scenario, in order to make your life easy, you can do that with whatever the right denomination is. So you don't have to do the $5 there. If for some reason it made more sense for you to use a different dollar amount for each of them to throw in, you can do that. Like for instance, in the lesson that I do that teaches the 1-2 no limit double board bond pot, I actually run into a scenario where it's like an odd amount by $1 for each of them, but if I take the dollar, then I still need to make change, and it's actually just easier to get 5 from each player instead of 1 from each player. And that's fine. As long as you keep it equal for what you put into the main pot, totally good. And so now we've got a scenario where this player is going to get half of the pot. I changed the hands up a little bit. They now have a king high straight on the bottom, and they still have tens full of deuces up top. This player over here and this player over here both have ace king. They have the nut straight and ace high straight on the bottom. So these players are going to be getting a quarter and a quarter, meaning they're splitting this half of the pot, and this player is going to get this half of the pot. So they're getting 50% of the whole thing, they're getting 25% each. And so now the question is, does this work as well? The answer is no. This method doesn't work in this scenario, and I just made the numbers easy for us to be able to figure this out together. So let's just think about it for a second. If we're saying this is 100% of the river money, these are $500 chips. So this is 2,000, 2,000, and 2,000, that's 6,000 total. 50% of that goes over here, that's 3,000. 25% of that goes here, 25% of that goes here. And I don't think the players are really used to this scenario. It doesn't come up enough for you to be able to be like, no, I know how to do this. 3/4 of this bet goes back to you. 3/4 of this bet goes back to you. You know, like giving 500 to this player, 500 to this player, and they take their bet back. The players aren't going to be comfortable with that. It's not intuitive. They haven't seen it 100 times. So in this scenario, I would always just bring all this money to the middle and say, all right, we're going to bring it in. There's no shortcut here. You can even say it just like that. There's no shortcut here. You bring all this in too. And then you go and you chop it all up accordingly. So I've given these players back their original hands now. And this comes up a lot too, so I just want to show you the scenario. This player ended up getting 0% of the pot. They don't win anything. This player gets 3/4. This player gets 1/4. And what you do here is you can leave their bets out there just like before. You take this to the muck and you bring this into the main, just like that. And then you do the same thing here where they get their bet back. You chop this up. Half of it goes here. Half of it goes back to the player. And then you chop this up, including this money here. And just to make sure that I'm crystal clear about this, one mistake that happens a lot is sometimes the player that gets 1/4 or the player that gets 3/4 isn't actually eligible for all the money. Maybe this player went all in and they called for less or something. Like let's say that this player over here had gone all in for this amount and they've only got 2,000 of it and they win 3/4 and this player has this too. Someone might count down this 2,000 and try to take it from everybody, but there's actually a side pot between these two that needs to get handled. So you can't just do that. First you have to take care of the side pot and figure that out. But I'm not going to get into that demo right here. You get the idea. In order to be eligible for a pot, a player has to put the correct amount of money in on that betting round. All right, so now we'll change games for a moment. Now we're going to be playing Big O, where it's a high-low game, meaning the high hand gets half the pot, and if there's a qualifying low, the qualifying low gets half the pot. So it's still a split pot game, and a similar thing can happen, just like in this example here. And there's a reason why I'm showing this. It's not for the Big O. I just wanted to mix it up a little bit. As a dealer, you need to avoid this mistake. So in this scenario right here, this player's gone all in, this player's called. You know, assume that it went bet and then raise and then all in and then call. And again, this player has a 10 deuce, and that's the high. It beats the eights full. And then both of these players have the ace tray for the low. And so this player is going to win the high, and these two are going to chop the low. So it's another scenario where 3/4 goes over here and 1/4 goes over here. And so this player loses, and I just want to reemphasize, we can't just go right to this player's stack and cut it in half and give them half, because we don't know that this player has enough to cover this. If the stacks are reversed, or if this player's got these chips and this over here, well, once we've established as a dealer that they've got them covered, then you can chop up their whole stack. But remember, a player's going to push their whole stack in when they're either all in or calling an all in a lot of the time. And we can't just take that whole thing and give it to the other player. We need to make sure that they have the same amount. And in these scenarios, as a dealer, it's a lot easier to just sort of go quickly and be like, I know what to do here, and sort of forget the basics. So here I am reminding you of these basics. So here we would count this down, and this is 2,050, and then we get that amount from this player here. It's nice that it's always 2,050. Makes an easy video for me. Push that back, and then just like before, we're going to split it up like we did. We give them half, so 2,050, that's 1,025. We've established that one already. And when you give it to them, you tell them take this back. When you give it to them, you do want to be clear about the amount. If you cut the thing in half and hand out half, that's fine. But if you have an amount that you're actually giving, that you've announced that you're giving, then you're going to cut it out for them. You don't want to give it to them and then push the rest through this without cutting it out. That's really scary and uncomfortable for the player. And then of course you chop this up the way that you're used to. And now if things were the other way around and this player clearly had them covered, when this player goes all in here and then this player calls and we see what the hands are, this player wins the high, these players chop the low, 3/4 here, 1/4 here. We don't even need to count this. We can literally just take this and say, we're gonna chop this up. We chop it up like this. We go here, it ends up having an odd amount. As the dealer, I'm going to say I'm taking 25 from each of you, bringing it to the main, just like that. And now I just hand off half of this stack right here, put this back. This player had this player covered, so the amount of their stack is the active bet amount, and we can just do our shortcut, and then we go and chop this up as we're supposed to. But you can only do that when they have them covered, when the player with 3/4 has the player with 1/4 covered. So look, this stuff can be a little intimidating when you get to the game and you find yourself in that situation. My experience is that the players that play these games where people get quartered are actually very familiar with this whole scenario, and they're going to talk you through it a lot of the time. Now, some players in some poker rooms are not going to be so nice about it, but remember, as the dealer, if you're not 100% sure, you can receive information from anybody, and there are ways to talk to players in order to make that exchange easier. See, dealers are taught to never say they're sorry, but the things that you don't say you're sorry for are mistakes. You can use language, oh, I'm sorry, blank, if you're being human, and it's very diffusing and nice. So saying something like, oh, I'm sorry, I learned this, it's just my first time doing it, is actually okay, as long as you haven't made a major mistake that you're apologizing for. That you don't apologize for because you don't want to empower the player to think that they've been wronged by the business. But in this scenario here, if you're taking a second to figure it out and they're telling you what to do, and they're saying it sort of not so nicely, you can say, oh, I'm sorry, I've learned how to do this. This is just my first time actually doing it. Something like that is very human, and it really makes it a lot easier to have that conversation. They can understand that most of the time. And occasionally somebody's going to say, well, you should have practiced it on your own and learned it on your own, and we don't worry about them. And if you like learning from me how to deal poker, you can join my channel and learn from scratch, start to finish, everything you need to know about working in casinos as a professional poker dealer. It's so simple. You just join my channel, get the monthly membership, and you have access to everything that you need. And when you're done with my course, if you need even more help, you can always book a session with me. It does cost extra, but almost everybody seems to pass their audition after just 2 sessions with me, and it's not that bad. One of my favorite things about teaching in this industry is that as a dealer, once you do get a job as a poker dealer, you're almost definitely going to make all the money back that you spent on training your first couple of days, if not quicker. Sometimes I wonder why people take on so much debt and give up 4 years of their life when they could learn how to do this in about 6 weeks for maybe $100, maybe $200, depending on if you buy equipment. Thank you so much for watching this video. My name's Marc Shumsker, and this is True Poker Dealer.